Hello and welcome to the Florida School Counseling Association's webinar from the Florida Energy Forum. We have our presenter today, Patrick Gillespie, and he is here today to talk about energy jobs in the energy field and how we can share this with our students for their future. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Patrick. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to listen about energy in Florida and what it means for future careers. So I'll just start off briefly talking a little bit about what the Florida Energy Forum is. It is a grassroots group of just Florida citizens who basically believe that energy is a vital component to our economy, and making sure that we put smart policies in place will improve the economy as well as national security. There's a tie there to making sure we're using energy sources that we produce here with the best technology available, rather than relying on other countries. And the national security piece kind of comes in when you're talking about using Middle East oil and from countries that are not fond of us. And so there's that aspect as well. So what our group does is we try to educate associations and city council members and county commissioners and other groups about energy topics to try to get them to engage with lawmakers and policymakers about these different topics, and we try to educate them as it relates to Florida. So what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about, in general, some of these energy topics. I'll try to kind of go through those quickly, and then at the end I'm going to talk for a little bit about the types of careers that are available, as I know that you are all interested in that. So just kind of in general, people don't really think about energy, but there are 9.8 million American jobs in the oil and natural gas industry, which is the largest energy supplier in the country. And this group basically believes that the right energy policies can improve the economy and the energy structure that we have. If you look at this next slide, you see a view of Florida from above, from space, and it's beautiful, and you can see the energy that's used there. You can see what we rely on for our way of life and what we've come to expect, but a lot of people don't necessarily think of that when they flip on the switch. When they go to a store to buy a shirt, they don't realize that that shirt was made in a factory that used energy, and it was shipped to the store by a truck or a train that used energy. And so it affects everything we do. We flip on the switch, we expect it to come on, we turn our computers on. Everything revolves around energy. So it's really important that we make smart decisions in how we're producing and using energy that is so important to us. Here you can see demand for energy is expected to grow from a few years ago until 2040 by about 9%. And you can see a little bit of a breakdown there of what our energy sources are. Look at the bottom two. Natural gas and oil make up the largest percentage, something like 62%. And this is information from the U.S. Energy Information Administration. 62% is oil and gas. There's coal, which has actually gone down and will continue to go down, again, based on some policy decisions. Nuclear we use about 8%, and then biomass and renewables and hydroelectric energy are sort of at the top in the blue, and they're about 11%. So oil and gas is an important part of the overall energy breakdown for our country. We're going to continue to need it for years to come. And the interesting thing is Sally Jewell, who is the U.S. Secretary of the Interior, recently said, this was only from a few months ago, she said that it's going to take a long time before we can wean ourselves from fossil fuels. And so it's kind of naive to say that we can just keep everything in the ground. And that's sort of been kind of a movement based on environmental concerns recently, that people have said we need to just go all to renewables. And renewables are going to be part of the future. There's no doubt that we are moving in a direction where we're using our engineers and our scientists to develop those renewable fuels that are cleaner burning. Now, natural gas has been a big part of that because as we've increased our natural gas production, we've reduced coal, and natural gas is a lot more cleaner burning than coal is. And so that's been a big part of why we've, as a country, reduced our carbon emissions by quite a bit. But you can see here that renewable fuels are going to be increasing, and they will be part of the future solution. Interesting thing in Florida, there are two solar-related amendments that are going to be on the ballot this year. In August, there is a ballot amendment that would provide incentives to commercial properties, businesses, to invest in solar panels. Those same incentives are currently available for residents, and they have been since about 2008, I think was when it passed for residential. So that's going to be on the ballot in August. And in November, there's another ballot amendment that will codify the use of solar in Florida. It's a little more general. So solar is something that's moving in Florida. It's something that a lot of people are interested in. Clearly, we have a lot of sun, and so those technologies are still being developed. In particular, people are trying to figure out how to store that energy. So when it's hot during the day, they're able to store it. So when there's a peak demand at 6 o'clock during the winter, when it's really dark out and there's no more sun, how can we still use that energy? And so that's something that that people are still trying to develop. Which is why solar can be used in smaller doses, and we're getting to the point where it'll be able to be used in more uses. Wind has not really picked up too much in Florida. Other parts of the country it has, but that's just another of the renewable fuels that are renewable energies that are potential for Florida. You can see here, going back to oil and gas, we are now the largest producer of oil and gas in the world. We've overtaken Russia and Saudi Arabia over the last 10 years or so, which is pretty amazing, especially if you go back to the 70s and you remember the oil energy crisis of the 70s. We were heavily dependent on OPEC countries for their oil, and it put us in a real bind when there were some foreign conflicts that put us in a spot where there was an embargo put in place, and we lost a lot of production. And so over the last 10 years, new technologies have really increased the production, as you can see in these charts. It's trending upward. Right now, we have a bit of a surplus, and so there were efforts last year to list the ability to export oil, which for the first time in decades, since the 70s, we haven't been able to export oil, and now we have that ability. So there are some policies that are moving that will help get rid of a glut of that oil, but our group believes that we need to produce and sell the oil to our allies that we can, so that they're not purchasing it from countries that would want to do harm to us. And so that's another one of the national security aspects of energy. It really affects everything, not only our way of life and our economy, but also has a lot of geopolitical effects as well. And as you see, based on the production in recent years, gas prices have gone down, and obviously gas prices, the price of oil has a lot of factors. It's not just one factor, but certainly global factors play into the price. But I think everyone remembers back in 2008 when we were close to paying $4 for a gallon of gas, and people who use diesel did pay that. I don't know if any places in Florida actually hit $4 a gallon, but I remember coming very close. So this production over the last 10 years has really helped, consumers and businesses as those prices have come down, and it's really reduced not only the heating and cooling costs, but also the gas that you put in your car, and all of that is sort of a factor into the economy. And so, simply said, policy matters. The decisions that are being made in Washington and also at the state level and local level do affect energy. Not only for Florida, but every state. And so our group tries to push to make sure that policies that are being put in place are good for the economy, good for the environment, good for American families. And one thing that people don't necessarily take into consideration when people say we need to go all renewables, get rid of all oil and gas, is there's no way to make that, currently, there's no way to make that financially feasible. And so you think about people who are lower income and can't afford a nice new car all the time, and can't afford that electric only vehicle. If you all of a sudden said your heating bill, your gas prices are just going to go through the roof, people just can't afford that. And so it's a gradual step to get more into renewables, but for several probably decades, oil and gas will still be important. And so this group believes that we need to make sure we're making smart decisions to push that forward and protect our economy. Here's a good example. 87% of the offshore acreage in our country is off limits to oil and gas production. As you may know, Florida, down there in the red, is off limits and has been for some time, and it currently is off limits until I think 2022 currently. There have been some efforts to try to change that. Most of the production, as you can see, is in Texas, Louisiana, basically up to the Florida coast, and then in Alaska. Those are mostly the resources that have been used. There were some efforts in the past few years to open up the South Atlantic area, Virginia, the Carolinas, and Georgia. There were some many people who were in favor of it, many people who were against it, and ultimately a few months ago, this administration decided to change and pull that area and make it off limits to production. There have been some efforts to try to make Florida available. President Obama did a few years ago allow what's called seismic surveying off the coast. What that is a practice to determine how many resources are available. The data we currently have is about 30 years old, and so what it does is it sends waves, sound waves down to the surface and measures them. That can tell where the pockets of oil and gas are. It's kind of a 3D technology, whereas 30 years ago they used 2D technology. So it's a little different, and those efforts are sort of ongoing. I don't know that any of those permits have been approved, but it's allowable down the Atlantic coast all the way to Florida, down to kind of the Cape Canaveral, Melbourne area. So that's something that may come soon, but those efforts have been fought as well. And so it's just like anything, there's a political battle over it. And but the data we have that's 30 years old says that there are 90 billion barrels of oil and more than 400 trillion cubic feet of gas out there between all of these coasts. And so there's a lot of energy that we still have that's untapped. And so just one policy that people are always interested in at the national level is do we open up areas or do we not? And so that's just one of those areas. Another one is the renewable fuel standard, and that term might not be familiar to you, but back in 2005, I believe, is when the law passed. It went into effect in 2007. When you go to the gas station, you probably don't even pay attention anymore, but there will be a sign that says your gasoline contains up to 10% of ethanol. What the renewable fuel standard was is a law that said that we're going to no longer sell 100% gasoline. We're going to sell 90% gasoline with 10% ethanol in it, and it was sold as an environmental. Really a big environmental gain for the country, that it was going to really help the environment by using less oil and gas and more renewable fuels. And ethanol is made primarily from plants, corn in America's case. And what has been discovered after the last almost 10 years since this policy has been in place is that it hasn't been as beneficial to the environment as people thought. It has reduced a little bit the amount of gasoline, the oil that's been used to produce gasoline. But what people have found out is that ethanol burns at a lower rate than regular gasoline. And so while we're getting better gas mileage now because our vehicles are better, we're actually getting worse gas mileage than we could be with our most recent vehicles, our current vehicles, if we were just using regular gasoline, pure gasoline, because of the way that the energy burns. Now, there are places where you can get no ethanol gasoline in Florida, but it's more expensive because less of it is produced. You'll see from this chart here, these are the vehicles that are prepared to use E15, which would be 15% ethanol. As you can see, very few are, and so this goes back to just an economic issue. If you're lower income and you're driving around in an older vehicle, or if you're not lower income and you're driving around in an older vehicle, your vehicle can't handle E15. Your engine was not designed with that in mind. There have been some efforts to try to move from 10% to 15% ethanol. On top of these issues, about 5 million acres of conservation land was torn down in the center part of the country to plant more corn, which obviously is not good for habitat. It's using a lot of water to water those crops, and so it's not been the policy that people had hoped. But again, these are just policies that pop up that a lot of people don't really pay attention to, that our group is a little bit engaged in, and we try to stay on top of it. But this is what you're mostly interested in for your students. and your future students is what's available, what's out there for careers. I will tell you that that our group does get some information from the American Petroleum Institute, which is one of the largest energy groups in the country. And the American Petroleum Institute has a lot of, as you might expect, petroleum companies, oil and gas companies. They also have a lot of interest in renewable fuels, and actually, energy companies have been investing a lot in renewable fuels because they recognize that that's going to be the future. And in talking about that, they do a lot of long-term planning, and so there's been a lot of talk recently about the downturn in the oil and gas industry. There's been a lot of lost jobs recently. However, studies show that there's going to be about 2 million, 1.9 million job opportunities in the next 20 years. And that's because these companies have long-term outlooks. They don't make decisions on staffing and heavy financial decisions based on near-term issues. They're really forward-looking, and so there are a lot of projects out there that will be moving forward, and they're going to need a lot of people, and that's because in the last 20 or 30 years, they've had a lot of hirees that are soon going to be retiring, and they're going to need new engineers, new scientists, with a heavy focus on STEM. And not only that, but they're also going to need lawyers and HR professionals and communication professionals and every other type of industry group that you can think of, any type of career group. And so this is an industry that is going to be looking to hire, and they're interested in getting the best and brightest. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. As you can see here, a lot of people might not think about it, but if you just talked about an oil well somewhere, for instance, it affects the construction industry. You need people to build it. Obviously, there's drilling involved. You need chemists. You need scientists, people who understand how these elements and these resources interact with our environment and the best way to contain that and the best way to protect the environment. You need engineers to create the type of structure to safely do this industry. And so there's a need. Trucking industry, you obviously need people to transport things. That can also lead to the boating industry. You've got hospitality. When you look at areas like Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi on the coast, there's a lot of hotels and restaurants, not only because people go there to vacation, but you also need people for when people come back to the water. From the water, they come to spend several weeks, and you need those industries there. Same thing when you look in other places of the country that have been part of this sort of energy revolution. You look at the Dakotas, Pennsylvania, Ohio, those areas, certainly Texas, these areas that pop up with a lot of energy resources that are used. There are a lot of jobs that just swarm to that area. So there's a lot of careers in those areas. And Florida could be part of that. Florida is not typically known as a big energy producing state, but we are. And for the last 60 or 70 years, we've been producing energy, mostly in the Collier County area and up near Pensacola. So southwest and northwest are the main known resources that we have in terms of oil and gas. Solar, of course, can be anywhere. And we do have some nuclear plants. So Florida does produce energy and has been for a while. And as you, I'm sure, can tell, the steel industry or pipe fitting and that type of industry is also needed. You can see here, this is just a list of the types of careers that are needed, and it's everything from skilled workers and STEM education to all other industries. And so there's a lot of people that soon will be retiring, as I said, and these are the types of this is a very short list, but this is a list of the types of people that will be needed. And so, just something for your school counselors to look at is that, if you have students who have something specific in mind that they want to do, if they are an architect, they might not necessarily go to an architecture firm that's building, houses or designing office buildings. They might, not even realize that the oil and gas industry or any other energy industry needs architects. And so that's just one example, but that's just the type of thing. I think a lot of people, when I've met with students in the past, some have said, well, I'm interested in STEM, I'm in this engineering field at my university, I really want to go, do solar. And what I've said is, okay, well, that's great. That's on the, cutting edge of where we're going. But if your concern is an environmental concern or a safety concern, why wouldn't you put your skills to an industry that has the majority of the energy production in the country? They need the same skills that a wind energy company would need, or a solar energy company, or any other. So just to get your students thinking that the energy fields need these types of jobs just like any other field, just like a telecom field or any other sort of high tech field. STEM education is needed in this field as well. And as you can see, this industry does pay very well. There are plenty of stories of students right out of college who get a degree in engineering or some other field, and they can right off the bat be making six figures. And so that's good money, especially when you're in your early 20s. It's good money when you're not in your early 20s. So there are some industries that there are some available jobs in this industry that are well paying, and so that's a good thing to point out. And based on the studies that have been done at a national level, there are opportunities for females and minorities. Every industry is looking for a diverse field of employees, and this industry is no different. As you can see, 20 to 30,000 jobs could be available at least in this area of the country over the next 20 years or so. But again, it depends on the policies that are put in place, and it depends on the decisions that are made and whether certain projects are allowed to go forward based on local decisions and state decisions and federal decisions. So there are opportunities out there. And lastly, this is just a kind of a giant overview for the country. This area does have opportunities, and obviously you can see Texas, for instance, has more than others, but there are plenty of opportunities in Florida and in the Southeast for these types of jobs, and they're not just jobs. Some are temporary. A lot of these are careers, and they're long-term jobs that can really lead to a lot of growth. So, the takeaway here is that there are a lot of opportunities in this region. And also, this industry is looking for minorities and women, and just like any other industry, is looking for a diverse group, because I think everyone recognizes that a diverse group of employees is important to move an industry and a company forward. And so you need different ideas and different backgrounds. And so, these are everything from blue collar pipe fitters and people working on rigs to upper management type positions. It kind of runs the gamut. And again, STEM is very important. So that's my presentation, and I hope you find it interesting. And I'm certainly willing to take any questions on it. But I think the main thing that we try to push is that policy is important. Not everyone thinks about it. Certainly, people don't always think about the importance of energy in their life. They just expect it to be there because that's sort of what we expect in this country, and it's not that way in a lot of countries. And that's based on the best engineering, the best science that we have, and we use the best technology, and we are able to produce energy better than any other country. And we've, over the last 10 years, we've proven that. And so our group wants to make sure that continues to be the case, that decisions that are being made are being made in the best interest of the entire country, and with a focus on the economy, certainly our national security, and just our overall well-being as a country. I will point out the website if you want some more information. We have kind of some policy by policy specific information on there. It's flaenergyforum.com. I'll also point out that on our website we have a STEM resource page, which has a lot of information on internships that are available, other resources for students who are interested in STEM careers, and a little bit about some opportunities in energy industries in Florida. So definitely check out that for your students as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Patrick, for your presentation. If anybody has any questions and you want to type them in, I will be happy and glad to ask Patrick any questions. So if there are any questions, we are taking any questions that you might have. It doesn't seem like there's any questions, Patrick. I think you did a very good job of presenting the information, and thank you so much for being here and for teaching us more about the energy field and the careers available for our students. I was also going through your website. I'm not sure if you spoke about this, but there are a lot of scholarships for students to go into this field, correct?
There are. There's a lot of opportunities, and like I said earlier on, a lot of people don't necessarily equate energy in Florida, but there are a lot of opportunities in Florida because we are such a big state. We're such a big energy user, not only our residents but also our visitors based on our tourism. So it's an important topic for us as well in our economy. But yes, there are a lot of scholarships available, a lot of internships available. So there's opportunities out there, and it's important for all students to be able to see those opportunities and take a look and see if it's something that they become interested in if they're not already.
Yeah, definitely. Shelly, you're asking if the presentation will be available. Yes, this presentation will be uploaded to the Florida School Counseling Association YouTube page that you can find on YouTube. We have all of our past webinars as well on there if you'd like to share them with your staff. So this will be available. Um, no problem. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you, Patrick, again for being here today, for presenting this very useful and informational webinar. And if there are no more questions, I will be ending the session. And thank you again so much, Patrick. And thank you, participants, for being here. Okay, well, have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.